We usually don't do this. We usually just launch into our intro, but we couldn't decide today. Like, what should we talk about? Because we had
What's the intro
a
gonna
few
be?
interesting things. And so we decided to kind of allow a little peek behind the curtain and to tie them all together.
Yeah.
Or at least tie two of them together.
Lifting the veil.
So topic number one was the menstrual cycle.
Yes. We can talk about our periods, which
How
is
did-
everybody's
how did that
favorite
come up?
topic.
Because I sit on a heating pad because it's
Correct.
cold in this room.
Correct. And I was pulling out my
Now
blanket
I
to go over my
remember.
legs. And then when she said she sat on a heating pad, I said, oh, there's a thing I shouldn't say because it makes me very unlikable. And then Shannon said, what, swamp ass? And I said, no, that seems like a really useful thing to do if you have period cramps, which I don't usually have, which makes me super popular with all of the people with uteruses who do have cramps. Because
That's
it's a very common
insane.
occasion.
Yeah, you have none.
I have
Ever.
none.
And then I said, I also don't have cramps, but I don't have a period because I have an IUD, which stops my periods. But if I didn't have an IUD, I would have terrible cramps.
But before she gave us the context, that was the unsubscribe heard around the world.
Right.
Where all of the people with cramps are like, forget y'all, I'm out.
Right.
And then topic number two was
how Skylar ruined my one opportunity to get a perfect Wordle because I thought Ouija was a really great first word. So on one of mine, I tried Ouija and it turned out that the word that day was my go-to first word, which was earth. And so I missed my one opportunity to get it right on the first guess. So thanks,
good.
Skylar.
Yeah.
I'm just
And
gonna
also
blame him.
whoever got moist on the first try this past week, shame on you.
That was a very upsetting experience for me
Mhm.
because I should have gone to Twitter and just seen all of the little vomit emojis and I would have known exactly what the word was. But no, instead I went to Wordle first and I started playing the game.
Yep.
Why do people hate that word so much?
Menses.
No, moist.
No. Menses is 6. That will never be a Wordle word.
I think people don't like it because of the imagery that it conjures. And because some people's heads.
Towelette? Because that's what it conjures for me.
That's really pure flow. That
You sweet
what
summer
image
child.
does it conjure for you? A towelette. No, I think people think of like swamp badge.
Okay.
I don't know.
I guess most of the thing, like I guess I think about moist and then moisturizer, and that's a good thing.
I think you should definitely continue saying the word because that's not going to be the second time we get a massive
unsubscribe.
Round 2 of unsubscribe.
The people who were like, I'm still here after the period talk, even though you all don't have cramps, but you know where you lost me? You kept saying the word.
Well, let's get to strike 3. Our third topic was going to be the land park terror, Stephanie Duncan, who follows council members around with a red bullhorn, and we were just going to joke about that for a bit.
And I said I would rather have a period than listen to Stephanie Duncan say anything with her bullhorn, with or without.
You never cramp up anyway.
Right. And friends.
Yeah, but I'd take the IUD out and have a period. I would rather go full, just give it all back to me.
You're risking a lot there because you're also potentially risking a pregnancy that you're not interested in having. I mean, that's not just a period. You're risking also going...
I have to get a new one soon anyway. So it'll just be the process, the process of getting it out and putting one back in, you know.
Yeah.
I hope this turns out to be like an iconic top 5 episode where this is the intro. I'm dying for that to happen.
Oh, Team
It's
IUD.
a ridiculous intro.
So folks, you got to see a little bit how the sausage is made on our side of things.
Sausages.
And
Yes.
I guess why don't we just like start the show? Because I don't know how we can. I think Shannon, you tied all of them together very well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know
Thank
what?
you for
That's what
that.
I'm here for.
Thank you for
Yeah.
that thread.
Ain't no thing.
All right, now let's go on to the show.
Okay.
Period.
Do it.
Menses.
Voices, the things they said. Voices, some from those dead. All the voices heard. Voices, things we say. Voices, they're in your head. All the voices heard.
Hello, everyone. You have Kempa.
And Shannon.
And Flo.
And no Skylar today. Turns out he is in Hawaii, I believe.
Woo. Enjoy.
Right.
Yeah, see, I saw some really nice pictures on Instagram or was it Twitter? Or maybe Facebook. I don't know. I follow him on multiple platforms, but I was very jealous.
I've never been. I've been to many places, never been to Hawaii.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah, they look like they were having a great time.
Yeah, no. Well, have fun.
Yeah,
I
See
hope
if we care.
the
whatever.
pina
Skylar.
coladas are delicious or whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Skylar,
Yeah.
We don't even miss you.
whatever. No.
You know, when
remember
I
your name.
miss, I'm nowhere fun, and you're somewhere fun. So
When
Yeah,
Flo
but you're
misses,
like doing.
she's like not even it. She's not
like
her cell phone's off. She's
Yeah.
not even.
you're up on a dais somewhere trying to browbeat elected officials. Let us begin. I think this is a really interesting episode. We had this is a request from someone very close to our hearts. Came up with the idea of, why don't you do an episode on sort of what the responsibility of a county is and what the responsibility of the city is, right? And so obviously, as a show based out of Sacramento, California, we can do that on whose responsibility it is to do something as the, at the county level, whose responsibility is at the city level, where they should work together, and if they do or do not, and kind of what the people can do about that. So to begin, there was a very frustrating piece that came out in the Bee the other day on a homeless camp over on Fair Oaks and Howe. And it seems like county officials are gunning basically to take on the city and use these poor folks who have nothing as pawns. Shannon, can you kind of paint the picture on what that's about, what's going on there?
Yes. So for more than a year, the piece states that roughly 30 men and women have been living in tents at this encampment that is located on Fair Oaks and Howe. So that would be like between University Village and there's apartments that run on the opposite side of that. There's like a triangle shaped piece of city land. And that encampment has not been asked to move. The city is citing the Martin versus Boise decision out of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which essentially states that cities and counties should not be citing or moving encampments if there's not a shelter bed available. And in Sacramento, there are no shelter beds available on any given night. They're full. So this piece of property is like, you can walk a matter of steps and you go past the county line. If you walk toward if you're like on Fair Oaks walking toward Watt, you would be walking into county space.
Right. So the camp itself is in city property or in public
right.
space, city area. But there is it's very, very near the county line, and then there is sort of a storyline going there.
So what ends up happening here is that the district attorney and the sheriff's office are soliciting information about the encampment from folks in the area, which makes it seem as if they're preparing for some legal filings. They've sent out a survey that is called the Neighborhood Nuisance Abatement Questionnaire. And it asks for folks to write down any activity that they have witnessed, which is quote unquote illegal or nuisance. They ask about property values decreasing as a result of this encampment. They ask what happens when they report issues to the city. And the Sacramento Bee was able to obtain a copy of the survey. And one of the questions reads, are you willing to sign a written declaration prepared by the district attorney's office to be filed with the Superior Court? So clearly there's some.
It looks like they're about to sue the city.
Right.
And these are the folks trying to sue the city are District Attorney Monster Anne Marie Schubert of Sacramento County, who is running for Attorney General of the state, as well as Sacramento County Sheriff Scott Jones, who is, I believe, running for Congress.
Yes. And I think it's a newly formed seat or a newly constituted seat. Yes.
Yeah. The jurisdiction, the way it is, the where of it all is all very new, and so there's a lot of people vying for this. But at the end of the day, both of them seem to be using this as sort of a tough on crime, red meat justice, get these folks out of here lawsuit that will help them in their eyes, in their elections. This whole storyline kind of brings together, it's a confluence of a lot of discussions we've had before in the show, I think.
Right.
One being, homelessness, another being, whose jurisdiction is it to, or whose job is it to address homelessness? And this is an interesting one because, in as much as these folks are living on within city limits, the money for the most part for addressing homelessness issues should be coming out of the county. And it really shows how little the county and the city are working together on possibly the biggest issue of our time as Californians. So what we wanted to do tonight was, thankfully we have Shannon, who's an expert on homelessness, who's been navigating between these two spaces for a very, very long time. We have Flo, who is a part of the People's Budget, as well as the chair of the Measure U committee, who knows very well sort of what money goes where and how your budget shows what your principles are. We wanted to discuss what a story like this says about ourselves as a community, and really, if you're a frustrated resident who wants to see these folks helped, who should you be mad at? Who should you be reaching out to? And what can you do? So Flo, you're also a member of the People's Budget. Can you briefly tell us what that is? I know it's actually People's Budget is just starting up again, ramping up again this year.
Yes. So People's Budget Sacramento was started in the summer of 2020. And the idea behind it is to really focus on budget justice in both the city and the county of Sacramento. And what that essentially just means is like engaging the entire community in the development and the execution of the budgets, and prioritizing support to people who are most impacted by, the ways that the budget are spent, right? And so when we think about most impacted, we're talking about an equity budget, right? Everyone being served according to their need. And we recognize that people who have lower incomes or are parts of communities that have been historically and in an ongoing manner, disinvested are the people who are most, likely to be in need of the support that we're providing. It doesn't mean that everybody doesn't need it, but those needs are really concentrated. And so that's really what the People's Budget is about, is focusing on the city and county and trying to get more people involved in these discussions. And as Dave always says, Budgets are boring. They are not sexy.
I'm not
And he may not be wrong, but he's not right either, because there is a way that, you know, the budget is where we decide what our real priorities are. So people can give a lot of lip service to things during campaigns. People can give a lot of lip service to things during, you know, speeches and on the dais, but how you actually spend your dollars is the biggest indicator of what you value. And, you know, even on a personal level, right? Like I was told when I was young that if you show me your calendar, and at the time your checkbook, that dates me a little bit, I can show you what's meaningful to you, right? Because that's how you spend your time and your money. And so for our city and county, that's how they tell us what their actual priorities are, even if they won't put them in black and white on paper, which is another issue. The city of Sacramento has no priorities. Okay.
Yeah. So let's, why don't I give you a little scenario and help bring a budget to life here. So let's say I'm a constituent of District 4 in Sacramento City. Like I'm Sacramento. I'm a constituent of the council member for District 4. Let's say on a Saturday, you know, the whole community is going out to discuss homelessness with our council member, Katie Valenzuela, who is the council member of District 4. Now, I'm a homeowner in East Sac. I'm very angry. I'm not very smart, but I want this thing to be fixed, right? I want homelessness to be addressed, and I want a solution, right? Now we'll say, let's just give him a name. You know, I'll just make something up. Well, let's call this constituent, I don't know, Jeff Harris. So I go to this thing and I'm frustrated, and I want some answers, and I want to know, you know, how do we address, you know, how all of these folks who are living on the streets throughout the central grid, and who I suppose some of them touch the borders of East Sac on occasion as well.
Oh, period. That's Menzies. That's the end.
Well, I'm angry. I want answers. Who do I like? You know, my frustration is like, I want this thing solved. I'm not that smart, constituent Jeff Harris, who is fictional. I want someone to help me walk through where budget money should be coming from and where it should be going to start addressing this on a real level.
Right. So here is the best way to answer that. If you are living in District 4 of the city of Sacramento, you are covered by both the city and the county. And that's important because it just makes things confusing, right? You live in the city of Sacramento and you live in the county of Sacramento. And so there's often this like kind of like back and forth that happens because people don't know the difference, and rightly so, they even have the same freaking name. But the city's budget is much, much, much smaller than the county's budget. The city has a third of the people. The city of Sacramento is the largest city in the county, but it has far fewer people. And the jurisdiction of what it does and does not control is different. So with the exception of 3 cities in the state of California, all of the rest of the cities don't have their own health departments. And what that means is that most of the services that are going to be provided are going to be provided by the county, especially when it comes to social services and health services. So that's
if the county's doing its job. If the
county is doing its job, absolutely. And none of those 3 cities are Sacramento, so that's not really worth noting, but I do like to give that caveat that there are 3 that have their own city health departments, like Berkeley and Pasadena. But for everybody else, your health department and your social services are housed at the county. So if you live in the city, it means that you have to figure out anytime you need something, whether you need to go to parent A, which is the city, to get it, or parent B, which is the county, to get it. And parent B is the parent who we don't often ask for things for, because parent A is the parent that we think of first. So we go to the city for lots of things because we view them as maybe more responsive. We view them as being a little more local. And that's who we hear about. We hear about, mayors more than we hear about, and council members more than we hear about our supervisors. But the challenge is that they have the bigger budget and they actually have the responsibility for a lot of the things that we're looking to do. And so that's the important point I think that we need to drive home, is that sometimes when we're asking the city to do things, the county really needs to be a better partner. And the challenge is that these two entities aren't like a divorced couple that's not speaking. They're like in a silent marriage where they don't speak to each other a lot, and maybe stopped having sex like 5 or 6 years ago and sleep in separate bedrooms.
But once every 3 weeks, they'll they'll bite the bullet and go to dinner with a fellow friend couple.
Right.
Totally.
And they are staying together for the kids.
Right.
The kids are 27, 32, and 35 and don't really care.
Yeah. The kids just want everyone to be okay
please.
At this point.
The kids are like, I mean, do you parents? I don't care. So that's kind of where they are in terms of like, they're not entirely alienated and isolated from each other. There are some collaborations and some working together, but it's not a functional relationship, as in, as soon as one's line of responsibility ends, the other one automatically picks up. And so we see examples of that. We talked a lot about this example of, what happened last January with the storm, where like there was a lot of attention focused on the city because the city had, shelters open, warming centers open the night before the storm and could have done something. And that's absolutely true.
This
But
is
it's
January
also
of 21
true.
during
21, yes, last January.
the night of terror, where at least a half a dozen people outside died.
Right. But the other side of that story is that the county could have declared a state of emergency. The county could have also mobilized resources around this. And while I'm still furious with the city for not doing what they could have done, because that doesn't let them off the hook, we also need to save some of our energy for the county and say, you all are kind of getting by scot-free sometimes in terms of getting the smoke you deserve for things that you're not doing, which is a lot. The county has far more parcels that they could offer up for safe shelter, for permanent housing, and they're just not doing their not carrying their weight in the way that they could.
Okay.
And this is, if I can say that, if we're talking about homelessness in particular, I think one of the things that's really important to remember that changed the trajectory of the conversation and the thinking around city versus county responsibility for the crisis is a decision that was made back in 2008, 2009, when the organization known as Sacramento Steps Forward was born. That is an organization that took over when the county of Sacramento sort of like threw its hands up to homeless services and was like, we can't manage this anymore. We need sort of a third party to come in and handle the HUD contracts and the, like the point in time count and like the navigator stuff that was going on back then. The then Mayor Kevin Johnson took it upon himself to stand up and say, Sacramento Steps Forward, this is the thing. It's, and everyone calls it like Kevin Johnson's idea. Sacramento Steps Forward was all because of Kevin Johnson.
It's our former mayor and former Phoenix Sun NBA star.
Right. And so I think what that really did was it changed the way that people thought about how issues of homelessness should be addressed in our region, because it made it really easy for folks to blame the city when the city's then mayor was standing in front of like every media opportunity talking about, permanent supportive housing and ending chronic homelessness was the language that was used at the time. But the reality is that we have this, it's a joint powers authority that Sacramento City and Sacramento County have joint power to help address these issues. So if you have an issue specific to homelessness and you are living in the city of Sacramento, you contact your city council person, which if you are the constituent that we just pulled the name out of thin air, constituent Jeff Harris, you would then contact your council member, Katie Valenzuela, because you live in District 4, and let her know all of the things that you'd like her to know. But at the exact same time, you would want to reach out to your County Board of Supervisors representative, who is Phil Cerna, and say to both of those folks, because both of those folks represent you in an elected seat, this is what's going on, and I would like to see solutions. And also maybe not just yell at them, but offer like actual viable solutions that you think could, help things move in a positive direction.
Yeah. So can we talk about like, okay, there are solutions like, we should have social housing at a mass scale. We should have permanent supportive housing as part of our triage for all the folks who are currently experiencing emergency situations. We want to have things like shelters, or perhaps a safe ground that has, very, very ample services that makes your material circumstances better than if you were, out on the street today. Who's got the real purse strings for that? Like, how much money is in the city budget versus the county budget flow? And kind of who's determining how much goes to these things?
I'm glad you asked, because the amounts of money are vastly different. So when we think about the total city budget, it's about $1.3 billion. And when we think about the total county budget, we're talking about $6.4 billion. So even if we, the city has about 500,000 residents, about 500,000 people, and the county has about 1.5 million. So even if we were to say, okay, well, the county's budget should be bigger because they're 3 times as big, but 3 times as big would only be somewhere around $3.9 billion, and they have $6.4 billion. So their budget is vastly bigger than the city of Sacramento's.
So,
and I think that's important to point out.
So, like, obviously, we want to talk to our city council member. They have a smaller constituency. They are more on the ground. Yes. And that's good to do. But our supervisor, county supervisor, let's say for this made up, angry constituent of Councilmember Valenzuela's district, who we're calling Jeff Harris, maybe I should also be reaching out to Phil Cerna and saying, hey, we know that you have X amount of dollars. We know that X amount should be going to homelessness, to mental health. What's going on?
Yes. And that's really important.
I think the other part of this to remember is that the county has a long history of having their like social service entity, which is called the Department of Human Assistance. And the Department of Human Assistance does things like, that's where you would go if you're a family and you are eligible for food stamps. That's where you would go and you would apply, family or single. If you are a person and you're eligible for food stamps, or if you're eligible for cash aid, you would go, and that's where you go get what people, would often call welfare. It's the welfare office. But it is also the space that works directly with people experiencing homelessness. They have an entire homeless outreach team. They actually go out into encampments and engage directly with people experiencing homelessness, and have offered shelter beds. They've offered motel vouchers. They have offered housing. The County of Sacramento is the only government entity that holds a family shelter contract. So the city does not, the county does that. Right. And I think it's really important to remember that while folks have become really used to yelling at the city about all of the things that they're not doing for unhoused folks, they also have to get used to asking the county why they get so much money and are not doing anything, right? Like, the county is pulled in $181 million of CARES Act money like where did all of that money go? Did it actually help any unhoused folks? Or why are we still waiting for certain things to come through? Like, use that same like fiery passion that we see at the council meetings for the county, because they've got the money, they've got the whole damn department, right? Like,
and also they have the authority. So the other thing that has come up a lot in some of the lawsuits that have been brought against the county in particular is that, like, so going back to, again, the night of terror last January, the county also could have declared a state of emergency and done things to be able to mobilize resources, right? So, and they have the authority to do that. All of the, stay-at-home orders and the mask mandates and all of those things come from the county because they have the authority to do that. So again, there is this abdication of responsibility of like, we're looking at, the city and saying, why didn't you? But also it would have made the decision a lot easier had the county done its due diligence and declared an emergency that night and declared that things needed to be mobilized and mobilize their own resources as well to be able to do some of that work. So I just want to make sure that we don't let them off the hook just because they're less proximate to us.
I think we have to add to that part of the conversation too, like that the city has to, like, as much as possible, maybe stop like making promises and saying that you're going to do things when the county has yet to be held accountable for the things that they are actually funded to do.
Right.
So part of the reason that we have so many people who are upset and calling the city and sending, emails and showing up at community meetings and all of this is because we have people at the city level saying that they're going to do X, Y, and Z thing. Our mayor, for example, has said time and time again that like this is the thing, he wants to work on homelessness and we're going to get shelter beds and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And so all that's happening is some public accountability. But I think if the city actually wants to hold the county accountable to the work that they should absolutely be doing, then they have to stop saying that they're going to do it too, right? And instead say we need to work in partnership with the county.
Right.
And I do hear that.
And reiterate that message over and over.
Right.
Yeah.
But say it time and time again.
Yeah. I think a lot of what you're both discussing here kind of reminds me on what people are hearing, what your average person in Sacramento or even in Sacramento County is hearing and where they're hearing it from, right? And there's a media element here. And there's something kind of interesting to me about that, as I guess I kind of vaguely consider myself a former member of the media, even though, we're doing the show, but city council meetings get covered very, very well and very tightly by our local media. Our board of supervisor meetings, a strong bit less so. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. And like, we should consider the fact that given the magnitude, given the amount of money and the amount of power that our county has, our county should have, give or take, 5 times the amount of coverage. But I feel like there's a few things going on here. One, county meetings are fully during the day, right? 9 to 5 workday. It's hard for your average working person to even have an idea what's going on at your county meeting, and then to even like set aside time to actually be a part of the civic process to do that. City council meetings often, not always currently, because sometimes they're early afternoon now, are after the workday, and your 9 to 5er can pay closer attention.
They're only allowed to do afternoon meetings at certain frequencies. Like they can have committee meetings and things, but city council meetings, most of them have to, like by city, by their, I can't remember if it's city ordinance or if it's their own council rules of procedure, but they have to have them like 5 o'clock or later. And that's not the case for the county. And the county also often will have 85 items on an agenda.
Yes. Right. And when they have 85 items, if you don't have community watchdogs or, a robust media staff to really go through every single line, things can slip through the cracks, very important things. And so that's a problem too. I think there's something to be said about sort of the way some of these meetings are conducted. I think there is like a very drab process in the county level meetings that sort of turns a person off, even a person in the media, and because people in the media are people, and they get turned on. It clicks to them. They start paying attention when something fiery happens, right? City council meetings are generally more fiery for any number of reasons. City level things can be more fiery. You know, let's say you are running a committee that is, you know, trying to determine where particular tax dollars should be going, and you end up dressing down an elected official for 10 minutes. That's going to get shown in the media over and over again over the course of a year or two. But like, you don't see things like that happening on a county level.
Right. Yeah, I think just in general, the city has afforded the public more of an open door for engagement, whereas the county I think the county, to people who are not familiar with the process and are not familiar, you know, with the county apparatus in general, they it's a little bit intimidating. You just, even walking into the county building can feel really intimidating, as opposed to walking into City Hall, where it does feel, you know, a little bit, it does just feel easier to walk into that building. Like the county building, you're like, oh, you feel like you're in a jail.
All up the steps, and it's just very intimidating.
And it's all dark, like, you know, it's weird, dark decor. Like anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I don't know
like
many answers to this beside, like, you know, I think it behooves us as a community to support media outlets, to have beat reporters more heavily reporting on this. But the business model has to work out, or else news outlets aren't going to do that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Should I move on to the next? I know we went kind of long on this, but this was so good, because I think we kind of broadly gave a good picture on city and county jurisdiction here.
Can I just say one more thing, Dave, before we move on? Is that,
I was going to ask.
When we think about the city council, right? There's the mayor and, city council, and there's 9 of them focusing on 500,000 people. But then when we get to the county supervisors, there's only 5 of them focusing on 1.5 million people. So there are both fewer people, which means that each seat has more power, right? Yep. And they also have a larger budget, and and then they have obviously a county executive as well, someone that operates kind of similarly to our city manager, but they have a lot of power at the county as well. So having a conversation with 1 or 2 people, they're representing more people, they have more money, and they're often going unnoticed. So like, your conversations mean so much when you're meeting with them, because while they represent more people, people are less engaged with them than they are with the city.
Yeah. So I think that's a call to action, to really engage on the county level much, 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 much more. Obviously, don't stop with your council member, but I think that's a really important point. This next one, this next part of the discussion is a little, maybe a lot of folks know it, but I just want to make sure they do. So let's say I am a resident of the city of Sacramento, and I'm walking down the street, and I see in a city park, let's say this is like last summer, right? June 2021. I see police chief at the time, Daniel Hahn, in full uniform, and I know he should be working right now, but he's out there doing acro yoga with an attractive young podcaster, and they're nailing it. They're really good at this.
Heck yeah.
Not only that, in the background you see all of Chief Hahn's, because he's so busy doing this amazing acro yoga with this really handsome young podcaster. All of his staff in the background are just like partying and harassing people, and they're all fully clothed in their police gear. and you're wondering, like, this is where my tax dollars are going. Like, I wonder if this is the best way that we should be funding the community. Maybe this should be going to better places. Who am I mad about? Who do I get angry to about that? Let's say that, like, you know, in a different circumstance, I'm, you know, somewhere, I'm on my way to Ileton, right? I'm driving down to the bottom of Sacramento County, and I see in a you know, at a winery, as I'm driving by Ileton, I see Sheriff Scott Jones out there doing acro yoga with this brilliant epidemiologist, and they are nailing it. Like, maybe not as good as Daniel Hahn and that podcaster, but like real good. And then in the background, you see the same nonsense with all of these sheriff's deputies, just, you know, terrorizing the flora and fauna and drinking way too much wine. And you're like, maybe we should rethink how we are funding our police or sheriff's department. Who do I get angry at in these circumstances, and who do I speak to?
So this is a great question.
It's a great question. So if you're seeing Sacramento City Police, you go to the city. If you're seeing county sheriffs, you go to the county, because although there is a difference here, and this is important to note, the police chief is like an employee of, you know, they are run by the city government. So the city manager runs the police department. That's not true at the county in the same way. So the sheriff is elected, whereas the police chief in the city is hired. And so what that means is that the sheriff does not, you know, basically operate under anyone's authority. That's why there are like colloquialisms about, you know, the wild, wild west, and I'm the sheriff of this town, right? Because there's nobody above the sheriff because they're elected. So you can go and you can report it there, but they don't have the same relationship as Howard Chan as Sacramento City manager has to the police chief, which is now Chief Lester. Like, there's not that same you are my employee and I direct you relationship with the sheriffs. The county supervisors, though, do control the sheriff's budget and have to approve it. And so that's where they can flex some power if they can get at least 3 votes, but they can't really they can pass legislation for the county, but they can't really guide what the department does. And that's a key distinction.
Yeah, that's really important. So if you are an electoralist and, you know, you're concerned about that on the sheriff's side, you got to pay attention to the sheriff's elections. I think, yeah, I mean, maybe there's ways to change dynamics on the county level and on the city level too. You know, the police, you know, oversight committee, the sheriff's oversight committees, neither of them have teeth in our county, but they could have teeth. And that the road to them having teeth in either of those levels goes through the elected bodies of the Board of Supervisors on the county or the city council on the city level, correct?
Say that again, Dave.
Oh, I'm asking if we were to give teeth to police or sheriff's oversight committees, how do we go about doing that? Who do we push on that? Is it, and my guess was the elected bodies, the city councils and the Board of Supervisors.
Yes, they could give some oversight authority. I think it's a little trickier with the sheriff just because the sheriff is not actually the county's employee. Mm-hmm. So that might be difficult. And that was always the challenge. So, you know, full disclosure, I used to serve on the Sheriff's Outreach Community Advisory Board and for 4 years. And what was frustrating about it was that the only reason you would meet is at the pleasure of the sheriff, right? It's not even like the police commission in the city where they have regular meetings and they're set by someone other than the police chief. Like, it was basically up to him whether or not we met, what information was shared, and we had no formal authority. And so you could, you had an audience, right, every other month for an hour and a half, but you didn't have any ability to be able to push on things. You could ask questions. There was, I think the idea was like there's a relationship. And I think it was mostly intended so that there could be community ambassadors for the sheriff's department, where you go out and talk about all the good things that are happening, and you bring sheriff's deputies to community events if you want them. And so but that's really the extent of what it was set up for. And when there were any conversations about there being real oversight, even in the form of an inspector general, which used to be Sacramento
Right.
City Police Chief Rick Brazil, there was pushback both in the meetings as well as in the way he operated. And when there was a report
He
that
got
came
locked out
that he didn't
physically.
like, he
Yep.
got physically locked out of his office and has never served in that capacity again. And the county board of supervisors kind of acted as if they were impotent, and unable to do anything about
Right.
that. So being the sheriff of a town is a really important position. And they carry a lot of weight and have a lot of power that goes largely unchecked.
I think, yes, like all of that is so true. And it can be incredibly discouraging, especially when you have a sheriff such as Scott Jones, here in Sacramento. One of the things I think, just to think about in terms of like call to action stuff around sheriffs is, and we already said this, paying attention to the election cycle that's Scott Jones is going to be running, will not be running for sheriff again. So that's good news. But also keeping on top of the county budget process. So at this point in the year, the county is starting to think about what their spending should be, right? Like they're looking at like their revenues, and they're thinking about, how they might spend money, and it will eventually lead us up into middle of the year in June, when there starts to be like public meetings around the budget at the county level. And that's where like our voices can be heard around how we want to see county monies spent. And to remember that last budget year, I think the work that the People's Budget put together was I think it was 37% of the county budget was spent on sheriff and fire, because they budget them together. It's a significant amount of money. So if we want to start to I think one of the most effective ways that we have to use our voice in this whole shit show is to make sure that we are showing up during the budget process and making our voices heard during that time.
The People's Budget appears to be, sorry, Flo, I just want to talk you all up before you go. This appears to be a really important conduit for what Shannon's talking about. It is a rainbow coalition of some really important groups that are fighting all these different good fights at the same time. And I think it's very important to folks, if they are considering joining or supporting them in some way, to do that.
Yeah. And just to add to Shannon's, numbers, like she's absolutely right. 37% go to the sheriff, but I think it's also really staggering that basically almost 3/4 of the budget goes to law enforcement or the carceral system, because when you add in probation, the district attorney, the jails, the public defender, and the courts, you're looking at 71% of that $6.4 billion going to all of that. So, and obviously the public defender,
and if you subtract them, that's still 65,
right? Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So, the public defender is one, and in the court, but you're still, like that's only 10% of the almost 72% of the budget. So it's a really significant investment that we have in this. And then we look at something like health services. So we were talking about, the county has all of this, but only 5% of the budget goes to health services, right? Only 3% goes to human assistance. So we've said what we think is important. We think the sheriff, by orders of magnitude of, of 5 to 10, we're saying they are more important than health services and human assistance. I think that's something that we really need to push back on, especially because, it's really like jarring when when I would hear the sheriff sometimes say, when people say, what about mental health? What about this? He says, well, we have lots of services at the jail. And I mean, as much as like you want to kind of punch him in the face for saying that, there's also this feeling of like, he's not wrong either in terms of the budget. Like, we've put all of our money in the carceral system. So if you're looking for your mental health services and wondering why they're not coming, well, it's because we spent money on these officers and the jail and probation and all of these other ways instead of investing them in prevention. And it shows up in the budget.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, that's why it's important that groups like the People's Budget Sacramento, People's Budget LA is really, really fantastic doing this as well, highlighting this discrepancy. It is appalling. It's something that if you go to other countries and lay out where they put their money, they don't do it towards punishing the people who live there. They put their money toward taking care of one another. And we have to ask why it is that even in a bluest of blue state like California, and a blue county and a bluer city like Sacramento, we still do this really disgusting kind of red meat justice funding.
Yeah.
And we really have to think that doesn't matter if there's a D next to your name or an R next to your name, or if we really need to think deeper on this and we have to think about a different direction.
Yep.
Can
Absolutely.
I ask, did I have a question? I think I had a question.
It escaped you.
I guess the final question is, okay, we just discussed where all the money is going, where it shouldn't be going, but where should it be going? How would it really be helping our community? How could we really be supporting one another? And even in ways, even if you're like, wow, I'm afraid of crime, crime is happening. And by the way, folks, crime does rise when there is a rise in poverty. So when you're asking that question, where should our money be going, our tax dollars on the county and city level?
Well, we could literally start with, if we could flip that around.
By the way, Flo is an epidemiologist and policy director at a major public health group that really is working to fix things like this. Sorry, Flo.
Yeah, I mean, like if we could flip that around, right? I mean, if we could get, if we could quadruple those budgets, you would be able to really see what was possible. And unfortunately, we are so committed to the status quo that we're not willing to do that. But honestly, like, some of the major concerns, even when we get into the quality of services provided, people are like, I can't access services, right? Like, I needed mental health support and there's nobody to help me. There are no providers. Everybody is booked out. I can't get in, right? There's a dearth of opportunity for people to get what they're looking for. And that's the story. I mean, Shannon hears it every day, but that's the story we hear over and over again when we're working on these issues is, like, let's start with, could there be more of what you already have, even if we haven't fixed the system, because that would be better than what I'm experiencing right now, which is seeking services and getting nothing.
I think if I'm, well, first of all, yes to all of that. And if you're asking for, like, if you're asking me where would I put money rather than
Cops.
No, I would take money away from the cops and I would put money into, health and human services, which, would be like mental health support and like AOD, alcohol and other drug treatment programs, and things like housing programs. I would put money into, regional parks and making sure, and parks actually is the thing that then also helps with a crisis of homelessness, right? Because then you have like bathrooms that could be maintained, and people could then have, you know, access to those bathrooms instead of just locking them up. I think putting money into things like just like upkeep of green spaces, and putting money into like messaging around public issues of public health, right? Like our public health department is severely underfunded, and that could be from like not only just messaging, like staffing too, but just imagine what could be done if we had a robust county department of public health that could say what needs to be said, make sure that the information is out there and easily accessible, could work in partnership with like the public libraries and whoever else to make sure that folks have access to the info that they need so that they can start thinking about the things that are important to living a healthy life, right? Like I think there are so many different things that, you know, a proper transportation system for a city of this size that doesn't require that people walk, you know, way too many miles in order to get to like a transfer station. Like there's so much. And for those who are, I mean, I know it's not our listeners, but for those who are worried about like pulling money away from cops, it's like they have so much money. Like, and
yeah, that's a fascinating thing. Like imagine if a public health department had half as much as the sheriff department had. Imagine the people they could serve, the people they could save, and how much healthier our community would be.
I will give you an even more realistic example because it happened and we've talked about it here. Imagine if when the coronavirus relief funds arrived to the county, they just all went to health services instead of most of them going to the sheriff's department until folks in the community had to make a big stink about it and try to recoup some of those. Imagine what the beginning of managing a pandemic would look like if the resources that were given to the county had actually been spent to manage said pandemic.
Right.
Just imagine.
I mean, we'd have neighbors who are still alive today.
Yeah, I mean, that's how deeply entrenched this spending mechanism is, that people just like even new money that comes in that should, like, who thought, Lauren, are we shooting at COVID? We need Dr. Schuyler on to tell us whether or not you can shoot at COVID. But as an epidemiologist, I
don't want to get the Joe Rogan treatment. I'm cool with Schuyler taking tonight off.
I think we just have like completely, because of the way that the county structure and even the city budget, because of the way that these budgets are set up in favor of police and fire, we've just like not necessarily we, but there's this like absence of imagination around what could be possible if we just like dreamt about pulling some of that money away, right? Like we talk about the crisis of homelessness and how you know, we don't know as like frontline service providers when a warming center is going to open up or when the shelter has vacancies and things like that. Well, if we pulled some money out of the cops budget, we could put that into a Department of Human Assistance budget, which could then be used to staff people who were making sure that there was succinct and real-time messaging that was going out to providers. I mean, just as one small dream, right? I think if we could allow ourselves to like take the anger that we feel and also use that to activate an imagination for what is possible, especially on the side of people who don't actually give a shit in the same way that we do, like we could get some really cool stuff done, or at least talked about. We could have those conversations that like elected officials really like to say, well, don't just yell at me, give me ideas. Right. And we could potentially start having those sorts of conversations.
People yell because the money, it's all the fix is in. It's right. Like you're going to give the money elsewhere anyway. So it's at least cathartic for me to yell at you than to spend time proposing something that you're not going to fund.
That's
Right.
fully true. Fully true. There are, of the 9 people on the dais on city council, and of course, we've talked a lot about the onus on our county level, but let's just talk about city council. We know that there are 7 bootlickers out of the 9. There are 2 folks who never took cop money, but the other 7, anytime the cops ask for anything militarized, those other 7 will say, yes, 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 please, cops, please take this horrifying tool to use against the community. And I think that, yeah. And they're going to do that whether you yell at them or not. So folks think you might as well yell at them.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there, so we're really at the end of the show.
Oh shit.
You 2 are brilliant. That was,
can I just
yeah.
offer a cautionary tale that I mentioned on Twitter, but I just, because it happened in my hometown, I just want to bring this like also full circle. So let's say, you're still pre-Grinch's heart growing 3 sizes, which actually is a medical condition. Your heart shouldn't grow that much. But let's say you're in that early phase and you don't care about any of these things. There are 46,000 bridges in the United States that are currently in a severe state of disrepair. And I'm sure many of you heard that, very recently, a bridge in Pittsburgh, which is my hometown, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, not California, collapsed and 10 people were impacted. Thankfully, there were no fatalities. But this is a bridge that, had there not been a 2-hour snow delay that day, would have had far more people on it and might have ended very differently. And this bridge was known to not be safe, and not be, currently maintained. And one of the things that had been discussed years prior in 2019 was the fact that there is a fee that's collected from the DMV. It's a motor vehicle fee, and it's supposed to be for infrastructure repairs to roads and bridges. And that money was diverted to the state police.
Weird.
And so, okay, you're sitting here saying, I'm healthy, I don't need this, da, 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 da. I know that's not our listeners, but there's also that you cross bridges and on a regular basis. And there are 46,000 of them in the United States that are currently in the lowest rating in terms of their safety and structural integrity. And the money that we are spending in other places could also be better spent on that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't know what else to say other than come on, people, we got to find better ways to spend this money. We got to, as Shannon said, use our imaginations.
Yeah.
Better ways to spend the money, better ways to have the conversations. And I think we are really lucky to be on this show where we can sit and do this for an hour, right? And then be like, you know what, this was a good conversation. Let's do it again in a month or so, have another conversation about whatever the fuck we want to talk about around the city and the county.
Yeah. And that's what this show is for, right? A 5-minute package on Capital Public Radio is about the best you'll get audio wise as far as depth. A 1 to 2 minute package on your daily TV show or daily TV news, you're just going to get less from them than you will from Cap Radio. What we want to do is to dive into something real deep. Obviously, where we're coming from perspective wise, but we want you to know that, right? Yeah. We got to end it. I'm just so thankful for you 2. You're just so great. But
this was fun.
It was fun.
I enjoyed it. I wish we had done it sooner. But anyway,
yeah,
I'll miss it next week. I'll miss being here.
Well, sorry, folks, Shannon's gone. But we do have Tiffany Rezel-Moyer coming on to talk about a great lawsuit against the city soon.
Dang it, I'm missing. Oh,
I don't know if she's on that one. I'll let you know.
Yeah,
but she'll be on very soon.
Yeah.
Flo, do you have something to say? I'm trying to wrap this, you 2.
I know. I just wanted to say an early happy birthday to Shannon because her birthday's tomorrow.
Okay, happy birthday, Shannon.
That's true.
Oh my God, I have to give Shannon a comparable gift to the amazing gift she got me for mine.
Oh my gosh, Shannon's the best. I feel like such a slacker friend.
Okay,
shut
okay.
up. Everybody,
I got a day.
Shut up.
Okay.
Okay, we're done with the show. Find us at voicesrivercity.com.
Yes, and the big thing I want to tell folks is, a lot of our contributions on Patreon have been dropping in recent months, and we really rely on that to keep the show moving. The Bee and the Chronicle charge like $30 a month for their subscription, something like that. So if you're not subscribed currently on our Patreon, please do. Patreon.com/voicesrivercity. Otherwise, we're on all the socials, we're on all the platforms. You know how to find us, you know how to Google. I am on Twitter at Kempa, YUKNOWKEMPA.
I am Shan N.D. Stevens.
I am at Flojaune, FLOJAUNE.
And Skylar is at Guillotine for You. If you didn't read about that in the LA Times, that's Guillotine, the number 4, YOU. Good night, everyone.
Okay, good night. Bye-bye.